All praises be to the Most High God, the God of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and peace to you in the mighty name of Jesus. I just want to respond to a news broadcast that I saw just yesterday. I guess it's a little old. I'm just now seeing it. I really don't watch that much television. But I saw it, and it was on Fox News, and it was a clip. And it was this woman, this news anchor, Megan Kelly, and she was saying that Santa Claus, as well as Jesus, were white. Okay, and she was speaking in response to a blog by a sister named Aisha Harris about how Santa Claus, the depiction of a white Santa really impacted her. And now there's, going back and forth on the shows. You have the left-right paradigm going back and forth about, this issue and how it's ridiculous to say that they're white, that Santa is white, and then on the other side they're saying it's ridiculous not to accept a Santa that is not white. Well, the concept of accepting Santa as well as Christmas is what is actually ludicrous when you really think about it. And for the so-called African American, we as a people to accept the notion of and to wholeheartedly accept these pagan and heathen festivals of Christmas, to accept the mythical / historical, because that was argued as well. We'll find out where we get today's concept of Santa Claus. But just to argue those things, to desire it as a people, shows us that we lack culture. We lack culture. And in addition to that, we are spiritually dead people. There is no way that we should be arguing about whether Santa Claus is black or white. We as a people shouldn't even be dealing with Christmas, period. And I'm going to show that to you. But I just want to first start off by reading the actual blog that is on Slate.com. I'm going to read a little bit of it pertaining to Santa, whether or not Santa should be white anymore. This is by Aisha Harris. It was on Slate.com, and it's entitled, Santa Claus Should Not Be a White Man Anymore. It's time to give St. Nick his long overdue makeover. So it reads, when I was a kid, I knew two different Santa Clauses. The first had a fat belly, rosy cheeks, a long white beard, and skin as pink as bubblegum. He was omnipresent, visiting my preschool and the local mall, visible in all my favorite Christmas specials. Okay, so she talks about how growing up, as did I, you go around everywhere and you see Santa in the mall. You see him in the stores. You see him even sometimes. I remember when the elementary school I went to, Santa would come and you could take a picture. Then there was the Santa in my family's household, in the form of ornaments, cards, and holiday figurines. A near carbon copy of the first one. Big belly, rosy cheeks, long white beard, check, check, check. But his skin was as dark as mine. Seeing two different Santas was bewildering. Eventually, I asked my father what Santa really looked like. Was he brown, like us, or was he really a white guy? Okay? See, this just speaks to the confusion that many children face when you think about it. When you think about our black children and these images and how they impact us. These images are stronger than words that we read. These images are stronger than the words that we speak. You control the image, you control the mind. See, this is one way that we have been mentally enslaved. It is through the image. We have been showed, and Santa Claus, that's not even the issue, really. It really isn't. I'm just using it because it speaks to, we just have no culture. But in addition, when you think about the image, when you think about the image of Jesus, a white Jesus, that image has mentally enslaved us in the same fashion. Because that's totally historically inaccurate, and I'm going to show that to you. But she goes on to say, my father replied that Santa was every color. Okay? You hear that about Jesus, which again, Megyn Kelly was able to slip that in. Jesus was a white man. And then in a later report say that's debatable. You know, that's kind of like it's debatable. No, it's not debatable. It wasn't white at all. Okay? Again, I'll prove that as we go along. So she goes on to talk about this and how this impacted her. And then she suggests that, she says, I propose that America abandon Santa as fat old white man and create a new symbol of Christmas cheer. From here on out, Santa Claus should be a penguin. Okay? So before that, she said, America is less and less white. But a melanin deficient Santa remains the default in commercials, mall casting calls, and movies. Isn't it time that our image of Santa better serve all the children he delights each Christmas? No. As a matter of fact, Santa, his reindeer, the mistletoe, the stockings, the tree, Christmas as a festival, all needs to be thrown in the garbage. Why do I say such a thing? Because it is pagan. It's totally pagan. It's totally pagan and nothing that a true believer should actually engage in. Now, if you are a pagan, certified, acknowledge that you are pagan, then that's what you deal with. But if you are a Bible believer, if you call yourself a Christian, there is no way that you should observe Christmas. And by default, Santa Claus shouldn't be an issue. But it is that much more detrimental for the so-called African American to celebrate Christmas. Why do I say that? Because according to Scripture, we are the chosen people of God. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm going to explain that as well as we proceed. Now, I just want to read a little bit from the transcript from the Fox News report with Megyn Kelly and what she said. Okay? And you can look at this on YouTube or, read it. It's all over the internet. Okay, she says, just because it makes you feel uncomfortable doesn't mean it has to change. Now, the young lady, Miss Harris, did feel uncomfortable. You could tell as a child this really impacted us, as it does so many people of color. You think about the black-white dial test. What dial is pretty? You have 4-year-olds who are a beautiful black color, beautiful brown. They are choosing a white dial and said, this is the dial that's pretty, this is the dial that's smart, this is the dial that would be a good friend. And then they said, which dial is ugly? They choose the black dial. And the black dial looks just like them. You see? They have already internalized self-hatred. We want to be a part of something so bad because we've lost our culture that we will hang on to a fat white man on reindeer. That is not even our culture. Even if you set aside the spiritual element, just from the fact that that is not our culture, that is European. We should leave it alone. This is from people who were considered heathens. I'm not saying all Europeans are heathens. What I'm saying is the people that came up with this, and we'll find out initially that they were straight up pagans. So from that perspective, we should leave it alone. Okay, so she says just because it makes you feel uncomfortable doesn't mean it has to change. Jesus was a white man too. And just let me say this, heathen is simply a term that means people who don't know God. That's all it is. He was a historical figure. That's a verifiable fact, as is Santa. Okay? She says, I just want the kids watching to know that. Now, she may have did that because, a lot of kids, parents tell them this lie about Santa Claus, and, she doesn't want to affect them negatively, so that's why she does that. She doesn't want to get, flack for that. So that's why I think that's partially why I think she made that comment in that way. Alright? I'm gonna just say that. I could be wrong, but I think that's why she did it. I just want the kids watching to know that. My point is, Like kids are actually watching Fox News. They're not. But anyway, my point is, how do you just reverse in the middle of the legacy of the story and change Santa from white to black? Well, you did that with Jesus. You did that with Jesus. The only thing is, it's not a legacy. I mean, it's not like mythology or mythical like the large portion of Santa's so-called story is. You changed Jesus from black to a white man. Okay? But let's just go a little further, because she says, she goes on to say, well, first of all, she says that this is a verifiable fact, and then she says that Jesus was also a white man. Okay, so let's get into that. First, I want to deal with Santa Claus. Okay, so I wish I could have answered the child's, Miss Harris's question as a child. Is he black or white? Well, first of all, let's talk about where he comes from. All right. So this is in a book called The Pagan Origins of Christian Holidays. The Pagan Origins of Christian Holidays. This is a book I wrote. You can find on Amazon.com. And this is not a book plug, but it just so happens that it's in here. Okay. So this is in a chapter entitled "On December 25th, a son is born." S-U-N, not S-O-N, because Jesus wasn't born on December 25th, and that gets to the root of the problem to begin with. You know, this holiday is not of the true and living God; it's pagan. So this is on the section on page 60. Well, this is an earlier edition, 65 in some. This is on Santa Claus. It says, the mythical figure known today as Santa Claus has developed over a number of years and is a combination of figures such as the historical Nicholas of Myra, Santa Claus, Father Christmas, the Germanic god Odin or Woden, as well as American commercialism. So so the concept of Santa has changed over time. The inspiration of Santa Claus comes in part from the 4th century Catholic bishop Nicholas. According to legend, Nicholas was known for doing miracles and giving gifts to the impoverished. Supposedly, his most generous act was providing dowries for young women that saved them from a life of prostitution. Okay? In some European countries, mainly northern Italy and regions of Austria, gifts and sweet treats are distributed to children on St. Nicholas's Day. That's December 6th. There are also obvious parallels between Odin and Santa Claus. In Norse mythology, Odin, or Woden, which is where we get the name Wednesday from, the day Wednesday, is associated with magic, war, hunting, and also the father of Thor. Prior to the rise of Christianity, when Yuletide was widely celebrated, it was believed that supernatural occurrences were widespread. One of these was the wild hunt. During this procession, Odin rode an 8-legged horse named Sleipnir. Sleipnir is likened to the 8 original reindeer of Santa due to his ability to leap across the night sky. Note, Rudolph came much later. Okay? The narrative associated with Santa's gift giving is also similar to Odin's. As children waited for a visit from Odin, they put carrots, straw, and sugar in their boots and placed them near the chimney for that 8-legged horse to eat. Odin rewarded the children with gifts. In Luxembourg, Belgium, and the Netherlands, St. Nicholas, Santa Claus, is portrayed as an old man with a long beard, canon robes, who has a book in which he keeps track of children's acts and gives them gifts based on whether they have been naughty or nice. In some Alpine countries, a frightening-looking creature called Krampus scares and punishes children who are wayward during the year. And if you ever see the Krampus, he looks like somebody who is like he's in the wrong pagan holiday. Halloween, because it's one of the scariest things. I can't even imagine as a kid seeing that thing walk, and they still have this this type of behavior today, where they have the Krampus scaring children in countries, in several countries, and it's the scariest thing you ever want to see. If you ever look up Krampus, Krampus, just type that in and look up a picture of a Krampus. And even as an adult, it looks scary. It looks like, again, it looks like it's in the wrong holiday. It looks like it comes from Halloween, which is also pagan, by the way. But moving on. In England, there was Father Christmas. Again, this is all a mixture, and the development has occurred over time. In England, he was Father Christmas. He was portrayed as a jolly, large bearded man with green or scarlet clothing lined in fur, riding a goat, and assisted by elves instead of Krampus. Okay? When England abandoned the feast day of St. Nicholas, the Father Christmas celebration was transferred to December 25th to coincide with Christmas. In the English-speaking world, Santa Claus, St. Nicholas, and Father Christmas merged. Okay? In the United States, the word Santa Claus was Americanized into Santa Claus and first appeared in the American press in 1773. Initially, his canon attire was replaced with a green winter coat, and he was depicted as a portly Dutch sailor. The poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas, better known as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, by Clement Clarke Moore, solidified many of the modern attributes of Santa Claus, which include riding on a sleigh and landing on the roofs of homes, entering the chimney with a sack of toys, and reindeer named Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Dunder, and Blitzen. See, that all came later. The image of Santa as a rotund, bearded man was popularized by the American cartoonist Thomas Nast in an 1863 illustration that appeared in Harper's Weekly. In the early 20th century, images of Santa, now listen to this, images of Santa were used by companies such as White Rock Beverages. Okay, so companies started to utilize this figure to sell products, which you see today. You see Santa Claus selling cars, Santa Claus selling iPhones, Santa Claus selling all these things, okay? Because largely these days are about consumerism, okay? So, however, the Coca-Cola company has influenced the modern depiction of Santa a great deal. For instance, the popular 1930s Coca-Cola Christmas depiction by Haddon Sundblom of Santa Claus donning red and white is largely why Santa Claus is almost exclusively depicted today wearing these two colors, because initially, as I said, he didn't necessarily wear the red and white. He might wear the green, okay? So if you go back, this is, again, he's developed throughout time, okay? Christmas, now here, this is what we should focus on. Not whether or not Santa Claus is white or black. We need to understand about the day in totality, all that it encompasses, and take all that it encompasses and throw it in the garbage. Christmas is undoubtedly rooted in paganism, and those who observe celebrations do so in error. Jesus was not born on December 25th. The choosing of this day was a strategic maneuver by the Roman Church. Furthermore, even if Jesus was born on December 25th, God never commanded that we commemorate his commemorate his birth. He told us to commemorate his death. He told us to observe the Passover. The Christmas rituals, symbols, and figures are merely remnants of the pagan rituals, symbols, and figures of old. Even the word Christmas, which comes from the words Christ and Mass, is erroneous because Christ never had a Mass. The round wafer used during the Catholic Mass is a symbol associated with pagan sun worship, which is actually at the root of the Christmas festival. It was around the winter solstice. Knowing all of this, how can one possibly substantiate the observance of Christmas and simultaneously profess to be a follower of Christ? Okay? So that's the issue. That is the issue. Now I want to move on to why we, so-called African Americans, who again, as I said, are the chosen people of God. When you read the Bible, we are the people that the Bible is talking about. The Israelites, that's who we are. I know that sounds crazy to a lot of people. And on one hand, it sounds, some people have never heard that. And then on the other hand, people say, yeah, I've heard that. I've heard these guys on the street cussing out people. Not all guys on the street who call themselves Israelites. Not all men do that. But so many of them do. And they, you know, they have that correct. That it, well, they have it correct, because some say that, you know, it's the blacks, African Americans, and then you got Latino. It's all messed up. But when you look at Scripture, when you take an honest look at it, we are the people. Those people were sold as slaves. We are the people who fit the description. We are the people who the Bible is talking about. Okay? So I want to talk about why it's so absurd for us as a chosen people of God to go after these pagan festivals, all of them, including Christmas. You read Leviticus 23, it tells us the days that we should observe: Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, Pentecost, Memorial of the Blowing of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, Tabernacles. But this is Deuteronomy 28, and let's listen to what Moses prophesied before Israel even went into the promised land. Okay? And I want you to think about it and think about if it describes the people who proclaim to be Israel today, or if it describes the so-called African American, those blacks that are were sold as slaves into the Caribbean, sold as slaves into South America, and are actually scattered throughout the world through slavery. All right, Deuteronomy 28 and verse 15. It says, "But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe and to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee." So the beginning of Deuteronomy 28, the first 14 verses or so are about the blessings that Israel would be bestowed if we were to continue to honor God, continue to serve him and worship him and obey him. But the vast majority of this chapter is about the curses that will come upon Israel if we refuse and were stiff-necked and if we didn't obey him. He says in verse 16, Moses prophesies, "Cursed shalt thou be in the city, and cursed shalt thou be in the field." Okay? When you look at us as a people, wherever we're at, if we're in these urban cities, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Chicago, Detroit, Los Angeles, Oakland, wherever we're at, New York, Harlem, where we're at, we are cursed as a people. Why do we go to many of these places? Because when we came here as slaves, I mean, granted, many of the states had slavery, but it eventually was kind of secluded to the south over time, because that's where the agriculture was. And after slavery, you had the Jim Crow South. You had this type of farming where it was like a pseudo-type slavery because you never got out of the debt. Okay? So we were cursed in the city and we were cursed in the field. So we had what they called a great migration. They even referred to it as an exodus, even though, ironically, we were a part of the real exodus into these northern cities to work in factories, to get jobs. Okay? But we were cursed there as well. See, it's a curse from God, not for skin color, because we're going to find out what color Jesus was. It's about being cursed for disobedience. Again, it's not about skin color, okay? As you may have heard. Cursed shalt thou be in the city, and cursed shalt thou be in the field. Now let's skip around a little bit, and I suggest that you read this on your own in its entirety. Deuteronomy chapter 28. So I want to read something. This is verse 30. "Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her." Now what does that mean? That means that not that your wife is going to go off behind your back and commit adultery. No, this is talking about a man coming through your front door, telling you to leave while he has his way sexually with your wife. That happened to us wholesale in slavery. Okay? Now ask yourself, did it happen to the people who call themselves Israel today? Because that's part of the confusion as well. Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt build an house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. We literally built this country. Okay? We built this country. And note that we were not a dumb people. We were a smart people, a brilliant people, a skilled people. Skilled in many aspects of life. Many trade. We built this country. We built this country. So you could say, well, why were you enslaved? Why are you on the bottom? It's because we turned from our God, not because white people are superior. That's why he said, I'll make you jealous with the people who are no people. We as a people should not be jealous of white people. There is nothing to be jealous of. Because if God had not put us in a position for our disobedience, they would not have ruled over us. Them and any other people. See, we put ourselves in this position. It's from our own arrogance. Arrogant enough not to serve the true and living God. So it says in verse 30, thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt build an house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. And we built literally the White House. Thou shalt plant a vineyard, and shalt not gather the grapes thereof. Built the South agriculturally. We picked billions of tons of cotton, but did not benefit. Let's skip around. Verse 32. Thy sons and thy daughters, listen to this, thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fill with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand. Our children were sold into slavery, sold, taken even from the mother's breast at times, and sold. And there was nothing that we could do. There was no power in our hand. Why? Because the power source, which is God Almighty, had turned his back on us because we turned our back on him. We are the only people that God manifested himself unto. Okay? Now, I'm not insinuating, as some do, that other nations cannot be saved, because that's simply not the case. You just have to do, as Jesus said, take hold of what was given to us, because he said salvation is of the Jews. Now the problem is, or the question is, who are the true Jews? You should read Revelation 2 and 9, Revelation 3 and 9. It says, Revelation 2 and 9, now the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. So you have some people today claiming to be Jews who are not. Okay? And Jew is one not who practices Judaism. You don't find the word Judaism in the scriptures at all. A Jew is one from the tribe of Judah. And after the northern tribes were cast into slavery, the southern kingdom, after it was split, after Solomon, it consisted of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi was spread in there. And they were all just called generally or commonly Jews. Like even Paul was referred to as a Jew, but Paul technically was from the tribe of Benjamin. Okay? But it's all about tribal affiliation. It's not about you practice Judaism. Okay? Because physically, there are no white Jews. That's just that's the reality. There are none. Physically. But if you were of another nation and you wanted to cling on to or take hold of what was given to the Israelites as people, it's more than one tribe, Israelites, then spiritually you can be a child of God. There's a commonwealth. Even when Israel left Egypt, they left in a mixed multitude. So they had other people there. Okay? But let's skip down. We're going to go to verse 36. The Lord shall bring thee and thy king, which thou shalt set over thee. See, we had kings at one point. Not Shaka Zulu, but David, Solomon. The Lord shall bring thee and thy king, which thou shalt set over thee, unto a nation which neither thou nor thy fathers have known. So we got brought to this nation. We didn't know this place. And there shalt thou serve other gods, wood and stone. That's why we're celebrating Christmas, Easter, Halloween, Sunday worship, which is also pagan. That's why we're dealing with these days, because that was part of the curse. He said, okay, you don't want to serve the true and living God, you're going to get out of my land, and not only that, you're going to go into these other lands. You're going to take you by the scruff of your neck into slavery to these other lands, and there you will serve these other gods. And that's why you had this sister. It hurt my heart to hear this sister say this, because I know that the mental impact that seeing that has had, the impact that of the white beauty, the white standard of beauty has had on our people, the impact of a white Jesus. You know, it's a reason why we have to try to have a Black History Month and do these things, because everything in this society is based on white supremacy. And because it's based on white supremacy, by default, many times, especially if you have your own culture like us, your culture has been stripped from you, your religion has been stripped from you. We take hold of anything we're trying to grab on, we're trying to amalgamate into a society that is hell itself when you really look at it. A culture that is hell itself. And it is not benefiting us one iota. It is not benefiting us materially or spiritually. That's why we need to come out of it. Mentally first. Come out of it. Right? So in verse 37, and thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, a byword among all nations, whither the Lord shall lead thee. What does that mean? That means everywhere you go, you're going to be considered an astonishment. People are going to hate you. They're going to come up with names for you. Question, who has more racial epithets than the so-called African American? Who is despised more so than us? So much so that when we move into a neighborhood, running from ourselves, we move into a neighborhood, 10 years later, that white neighborhood where it only had one black person, one black family, is majority black now. Every so often in some neighborhoods you have white people that just couldn't escape because economically they weren't in the position to do so. But actions speak louder than words. This is not a melting pot. I mean, whites don't want to live with blacks, which is up to them, but understand we shouldn't desire to live with them. I'm not saying you have to hate other people, but you must first love yourself. And the lack of self-love and the internalizing of self-hatred is a problem in our communities. That's why we can look at our brother and kill him like a dog in the street, when we should know the truth. The truth is that we are the chosen people of God. Just think, if we understood what the scriptures are saying as a people, that we were the chosen people of God, and how we would look at one another. See, right now, we look at each other as historically the white man in America has looked at us, like a beast. Like a beast, like something undesired. Black skin as something to be ridiculed, when dark skin is dominant and light skin is recessive. Dark hair, dark eye, all that's dominant. You know, trendsetters in the society in which we live. You know, so you have people imitating you, but at the same time hating you, right? So it says, which will be an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword. Verse 45. And this is what we need to know. Or verse 41, I'll read that. Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity. You know, you look at Roots, that story, which is suspect, but one part about it was real. I'm not saying it was all fake. What I'm saying is when you look at the history of it being written, how it was written, and even how he tried to trace his lineage back was suspect. But it says, thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity. That happened to us. That happened to us. We were sold. That was a big fear, to be sold, your children, or you to be sold away from your family, to be sold if you were in one of the upper slave states, to be sold down deep south, or to be sold, across the state, because your slave owner had come into some financial turmoil. He would sell you like a chicken or a cow. Okay? He says in verse 43, the stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. Look at the strangers. We don't even truly have communities. But when you have groups of black people living together, look who controls the economy. Oftentimes, it is someone who doesn't look like us. It is someone from another nation who has set up shop, selling us death, selling us fake hair and poison to put in our hair. Things we don't need. Our hair is beautiful. We don't need a texturizer, a S-curl. We don't need a relaxer. You have little girls being pained by their mothers when their mothers put that lye in their hair. And then wonder when they're 12 why their hair won't grow. And why they're 32 why it's falling out. We have that. We have people that come in our community selling us rotten meat, selling us liquor, selling drugs out of gas stations. Things we don't need. Why is that? Because this stranger has gotten amongst us. And they're the ones that own the properties in our communities. Give us terrible customer service, jack up the prices, and we are steadily going to these people, and they just exploit us. And Koreans do it, the Arabs come in and do it, whites have historically done it. The list goes on and on. But listen to this. 45. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee and shall pursue thee. These curses have indeed pursued us and overtake thee till thou be destroyed. And we are destroyed as a people, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of the Lord thy God. Notice, it didn't say because you were inferior. It didn't say because you were black. It didn't say because whites are superior. It says because thou hearkenest or listen not to the Lord. That's why. We did not listen. We refused to be obedient. It says, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to keep his commandments and his statutes which he commanded thee. Okay, that's the reason. That's verse 45. That's the reason that so-called African Americans are in the condition that we are in. 46. And they shall be upon thee. What is they? These curses. And they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever. So, and when it says forever, if you read further, you read another place in Deuteronomy, it tells you that eventually we're going to turn back to God and be back on top once again as a nation. But these shall be a sign. When you want to find the chosen people of God, there's a sign on them. They are cursed as a people. They're not profiting right now. They didn't go into the land in 1948. Because if you really think about it, the scripture said that David would be there when they went into the land. David is not there. When you really think about it historically, they are not a white people or white-looking people, because they're not a white-looking people. Okay? Let's go to verse 63. Okay, and it says, and it shall come to pass that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good and to multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you to naught or nothing. And ye shall be plucked from off the land whither ye go to possess it. See, this prophecy was made prior to Israel even going into the promised land. 64. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people. And we are scattered amongst all people of the world. from the one end of the earth even unto the other. And what will we be doing there? And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. We serve the God of Israel initially. We came out of Egypt. We serve the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You know? Now you have us doing what? Arguing about whether or not Santa Claus should actually be a penguin. Excuse me, that's absurd. That is absurd. Excuse me. I'm a little under the weather, so forgive me. I'm going to skip down to verse 67. In the morning thou shalt say, would God it were even. And at even thou shalt say, would God it were morning. For the fear of thine heart, wherewith thou shalt fear. And for the sight of thine eyes, which thou shalt see. And that's how it is. Verse 66, you read it, it tells us our life would hang in doubt. And that's how it is every day. Verse 68. And the Lord, listen to this, because if you are confused about who they are, who the children of Israel are, or you don't believe me, explain this verse to me. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. Now, Egypt for Israel represents the house of bondage. That was our first bondage. You read in Genesis when Abraham, he was shown how his seed would be in a land where they would serve as slaves. And we were there for approximately 400 years. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt, or the house of bondage, again with ships. No, you don't need a ship to go into Egypt. What is he talking about? He's talking about slave ships. He's prophesying of the transatlantic slave trade. Yes, that's right. The transatlantic slave trade is in the Bible. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. So you're going into slavery by way of slave ships. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. What does that mean? Well, you're going to be sold and nobody's going to redeem you out of your position. Nobody's going to save you from that. Not a man. If you read in other places, you know that God is the one, just like he did in Egypt, he's going to do in the whole world. But you see, and ask yourself this question. You see what the scripture says. You read what it says. Now ask yourself this question. Were the people that call themselves Israel today taken by slave ships and sold as slaves? No. This is our history. Our history didn't start in 1619 when we came here, or even before that. It didn't start, some came to this country. It didn't start then. You can read the Bible and see our history. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, and there you shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. So you're going to be on auction blocks being sold, which happened to us. Look up the history of Wall Street. We were sold as slaves, as commodities, stripped naked, sold, men, women, and children. You look at the old advertisements for slaves from the 1800s, okay? We went on ships as slaves. And it says, no man shall buy you. What does that mean? How are you sold and no man buys you? You're sold and no man redeems you. Nobody, you notice that the Africans, who know who they are, by the way, didn't come and save us. You ever notice that? They didn't come because they understood that we were a people dwelling amongst them. How did we get there? Well, largely after the ransacking of Jerusalem, where you read historical accounts that Israel went into Africa, million by million, more than that, went into Africa. There, as strangers, we settled into these places, and when the transatlantic slave trade occurred, we were the ones most susceptible to being sold. because we were dwelling as strangers amongst other people. That's why it's no coincidence that you have all these tribes, all these groups of people, I should say, in Africa saying, yeah, Nigeria, South Africa. You have the Limba, you have Aruba. You have all these people, Beta Israel saying, yeah, we Israel. That's not by a coincidence. Okay? So, no man would redeem you. Not Martin, not Malcolm, not Marcus Garvey, who came before them, not W.B. Du Bois, Nat Turner, when his revolutionary spirit, Denmark Vesey, Gabriel Prosser, and their revolutionary spirit were not able to do it. Even John Brown was not able to do it. You say we're not in chattel slavery right now. Notice we haven't gone home. Notice we're still in this land. Notice we still don't know who we are as a people. Because I can even read that scripture to you. And we're basically not profiting. Trying to grab on to somebody else's culture. Trying to make Santa Claus a penguin. Let's go to, I just want to read verse 26, Deuteronomy 32 and 26, because I made the statement that we don't know who we are as a people. That was part of what happened to us. Deuteronomy 32 and 26. It says, I said I would scatter them into corners. So we've been scattered all over. I would make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. So that's why you don't know who you are we don't know who we are as a people. Okay? That's why it sounds absurd when I would suggest such a thing. Now, why is this such a detriment? Because of what we were supposed to be. What were we supposed to be? What was Israel, who was a black people that had been scattered into slavery? What were we supposed to be? This is Exodus, the 19th chapter, and I'm going to read one verse. Exodus 19 and 6. In reference to Israel, it reads, and ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests. We were God's priests. That's why people don't know God now. Because his priests, the ones who were commissioned to be priests as a nation, as a kingdom, turn their back on him, and that's why nobody else knows God. That's why people are going after Catholicism, which is the root of of today's Christianity. Whether you call yourself a Baptist or Episcopalian, Presbyterian, all that derives out of Rome. Okay? So it says, which is not of God. And ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests. That's the mystery Babylon, by the way. And ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and an holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. So we were to be a kingdom of priests. The Bible tells us, only you have I known, talking about Israel, only you have I known, therefore, of all nations, therefore I will punish you for all your iniquity. Paul writes, what advantage doth have the Jew, much chiefly in every way, for unto them were committed the oracles of God. It was given to us, and we were supposed to be an example to other nations. We were supposed to show other nations about the true and living God. You know? And that's why nobody knows, practically nobody knows about the true and living God, because his children sinned against him. He tells us in our book, see, this is our book. Yes, it's been transliterated into English, but he said, by stammering lips in another tongue would I speak unto this people. You see, God's not limited by language. He's speaking to us through his word in the tongue of our captors. Let's go to Jeremiah, because he tells us all of this is foolishness. These customs, we need to leave them alone. This is Jeremiah 10. And I'm going to read this and tell me if it sounds familiar. Not literally tell me, but think about whether or not it sounds familiar. Jeremiah 10 and 1. Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. So he's talking to us. See, the so-called African American, the whole word of God's talking to you. It's talking to you. Other people have claimed it and made it their own. Have made this word about them in some kind of way. It's like, for example, Gentiles we call European. Just for example, the vast majority of the book is not even talking about them or to them.
Not saying that they cannot be saved. That's not what I'm saying. They have to take hold of what Israel was given. This is your history. This is your book. Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord. Listen to this. Learn not the way of the heathen. Now, Christmas is the way of the heathen. Easter, the way of the heathen. Halloween, the way of the heathen. They didn't get associated with Christ until much later. See, that's how you know God didn't come up with those days. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, the sun and the moon, the stars. For the heathen are dismayed at them. Listen to this. For the customs of the people are vain. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workmen with the axe. So you got these heathen. This is before Jesus was born. Before Christmas was called Christmas. They deck it, talking about the tree, they deck it with silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and with hammers that it move not. Now, that's talking about, you see that custom today, a Christmas tree. You see, the Lord tells us not to do it. Why? Because it's from paganism. It's a heathen custom. And then you go get on your knees and bow down to that God, which is that tree. Then you throw it out. Foolishness. What does he say about the tree? In verse 8, he says, but they are altogether brutish and foolish. The stock is a doctrine of vanities. See, we need to push these things aside. No so-called African American, no black American in this country, no Israelites should observe Christmas at all. Just from a cultural standpoint. And Kwanzaa, leave that mess alone too. But you need to observe the days that were given by God. Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, Pentecost, Memorial of the Blowing of the Trumpets, Day of Atonement, Feast of Tabernacles, the seventh day Sabbath. All these you can read about in scriptures. All these are the days that Jesus, who we call Jesus, the one who we refer to as Jesus, the Messiah, he observed. All right? Let's go to speaking of him. I want to move on to Megyn Kelly's claim that Jesus was white, because she kind of slipped that in there. Yeah, Jesus was white as well. Now, you can have Santa. You can call him white all you want to. From my perspective, could care less. Because the day you can have Santa, you can have that fat white man, you can have that beard, you can have his 8 or 9 reindeer, you can have that pagan tree, you can have Christmas, because it has nothing to do with Christ or the Mashiach or the Messiah at all. You can take that foolishness, and because it's a heathen festival, you can have it. Those are ways of the heathen. Heathen are people that don't know God. Only a people that don't know God would come up with Wooden and Odin, would come up with Santa and this falsehood and try to say that God, the one that created heaven and earth, came up with that. You can take Rudolph, you can take all that. You can take your white Santa. But what you cannot do is take Jesus, the one we call Jesus, and say that he was a white man. You can't do that. Again, Santa, do it all you want. Bill O'Reilly, hey, Santa can be white. That's cool. If that's what you want to do, go right ahead. But Jesus was not white. Jesus was not white. Let's look at this. This is Revelation 1. John the Revelator tells us, Revelation 1 and verse 14, referring to Son of God. His head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow. So he had white hair. And his eyes were as a flame of fire. And his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace. And his voice as the sound of many waters. How do you get a blue-eyed, pale skinned, stringy haired Messiah? You don't. You don't. So you made the statement, how do you change the legend in the middle? Make him from white to black. Well, the same way white people have changed the historical figure of Jesus from white to black. And some people question whether or not he was a historical figure. There are countless accounts of individuals who lived not that long after Jesus who talks about him being a historical figure. Talk about him actually existing. So that's another issue. Like when you read about a lot of these historical figures of antiquity, oftentimes the account we find hundreds and hundreds of years later. But when it comes to Jesus, you can find many accounts that were very close to the time in which he had just left the scene. But I want to read that again. And his feet, this is Revelation 1:15, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. Alright, you burn it, it said the color of fine brass, as if it had been burned in the oven or a furnace. It didn't say that he was white. Let's go to Daniel. Let's go to Daniel, the 7th chapter. Because it said his hair was white like wool. Let's get a look at the texture of his hair. This is Daniel 7 and verse 9. Talking about Son of Man. It says, I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit. So he's talking about when he's coming back. It says, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. Why does it say that? Because he had hair like wool. His throne was like a fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. He had hair like wool. His skin was the color of brass, as if it had been burned in an oven. See, he didn't look like the depiction that we have today. So where do we get the concept of a white Jesus? Let's turn to another book. It's another book I wrote, Into Egypt Again with Ships. Again, this is not a book plug, but many of the references in here speak directly to the subject matter at hand. I write, to be honest with you, I write to basically, whatever God puts on my heart, that's what I try to write. But I write to basically dispel a lot of the foolishness that we have in us as a people, so we can turn back to God. That's my whole point of writing. Not even to sell books. Okay, that's not the issue. Deuteronomy. I said Deuteronomy. Excuse me. This is in Egypt Again with Ships. This is on page 9. Because again, the question that I pose is, where do we get the concept of white Jesus? This is on page 9. In chapter 2, the title of the chapter is The Color of the Ancient Israelites. So it says, on page 9, for many years, the dominant portrayal of the Israelites has been one of a people who have white skin and appear to be Caucasian. Now, when you think about Jesus, white or black people, when you think about Jesus, they both white, black, they think of a white Jesus. They can say with their lips he's black, and they'll even think, but they'll think in their mind, that's mental slavery, that he's white. This is mainly due to artists such as Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, both of whom created some of the world's most recognizable depictions of the Israelites known today. However beautiful these artists' depictions may be, I'm talking skill-wise beauty, artistic beauty. However beautiful these artistic depictions may be, they grossly misrepresent. I'll say it again, they grossly misrepresent the appearance of the ancient Israelites. The reasons for these inaccurate portrayals is quite understandable, since most human beings have a tendency to conceptualize a God that appears as they do. Oftentimes you see that, not in every instance. Not in every instance. You think about the Black Madonnas throughout Europe. You think about the earliest depictions of Jesus, the disciples, people of the book, Abraham, all these people, they were black. And you could find them today. It's not much until much later that you get these white depictions of criminals and family members of these artists. Artists created oftentimes as commanded by religious leaders, commissioned by the Pope. sculptures, and paintings of biblical figures that appear very similar to the people who their artistic works were meant to inspire. Thus today, most individuals are familiar with and continue to accept the notion that Jesus and the Israelites are white. Since the individuals who control the image of God and his people happen to be European, the images of Jesus and the Israelites as Europeans have permeated throughout the entire world. Okay? So, how do we know that Jesus and the Israelites were black people? Let's turn to page 14 of this same book. Page 14 of this same book. Okay? Because we want to read one way you know that the Israelites, Jesus was an Israelite of the tribe of Judah. You know he was black because Israelites were mistaken for Egyptians. And the ancient Egyptians were black. It wasn't until the Arab conquest, the rise of Islam, that you have Arabs in Egypt, and now it's considered an Arab country because they conquered much of North Africa. Okay? So this is Herodotus, who is called the father of history. Now this is what he said about the Egyptians. He says, and notice he was not trying to determine skin color, because back then everybody knew, they knew that the Egyptians, the Ethiopians, and the Israelites were black people. Okay? If you go back into some of these other writings. But it says, for the people of Cochise are evidently Egyptian. He said, and this I perceived for myself. This is in the Histories, book 204 in Herodotus. It says, so when I had come to understand the matter, I asked them both. And the Colchians had remembrance of the Egyptians more than the Egyptians of the Colchians. But the Egyptians said they believed that the Colchians were part of the army of Sesostris. That this was so, I conjecture myself, not only because they are dark-skinned and have curly hair. Okay? Then he goes on to talk about circumcision. But he described them. He's saying that the Egyptians have dark skin and curly hair. He says also in book 2 of 22, he says, now he's trying to determine something else. His subject matter is not about whether or not the Egyptians were black. But listen to how he describes them. He says, who are of black color by reason of the burning heat. Now, some people will try to claim, well, Herodotus didn't know, he didn't know their custom. He didn't know, he's made a mistake. Now, he may not have known some of their customs and misinterpreted them, but Sheikh Anta Diop, in The African Origin of Civilization, Myth or Reality, I talk about what he said in his book. This was a great scholar. He was a great scholar. But listen to what he said. He said that Herodotus may have been mistaken concerning the customs of the Egyptians, but argues that this is what he argued, Herodotus was at least capable of determining their skin color. See, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old can tell you the color of a person. Okay, so let's go. So the Egyptians were black. Well, again, why is that significant? Because Israelites from several tribes were mistaken for Egyptians. This is Genesis 42. And we know today, again, Arabs control Egypt today. But if you go back in history, you know that the ancient Egyptians were a black people. Genesis 42 and 6 and 7. This is the account of Joseph. Joseph was sold by his brothers into slavery. Some Ishmaelites sold him into slavery in Egypt. He went into Egypt, and then he ascended into the second in command. Listen to this in verse 6. Genesis 42 and 6. And Joseph was the governor over the land. And it was that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came because it was a famine. And they needed to come down to Egypt to get some food. And bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. Just like you read in Genesis 37, 7 and 10, that Joseph dreamed what happened. And Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them. Now this is many years later after they sold him. But made himself strange unto them, and spake roughly unto them, and said unto them, Whence come ye? And they said, From the land of Canaan to buy food. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew not him. How did they not know Joseph? Because Joseph was an Egyptian god. Joseph was making himself strange unto him as if he was an Egyptian, and Joseph looked like an Egyptian. If Joseph looked like he was a Caucasian, or the people who call themselves Israel today, he would have stuck out in Egypt like a sore thumb. Okay? But the fact was that Joseph just looked like a black man amongst other black men. Okay? So that's Joseph. That's a tribe. That's a tribe. Now let's go to another tribe. Let's go to the tribe of Levi. Let's go to Moses. This is Exodus. This is Exodus, the 2nd chapter, and verse 16. It says, "Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters. And they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. And when they came to Reuel their father, he said, How is it that ye are come so soon today? And they said," verse 19, "and they said, An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us and watered the flock." Wait a minute. An Egyptian? Why are they calling Moses an Egyptian? They call him Moses an Egyptian because perhaps he had on Egyptian garb, but they assumed he was an Egyptian. He had to look like the Egyptians. Let's go all the way to the New Testament in Acts, the 21st chapter. Acts 21. So again, going back to this woman's claim, Megyn Kelly's claim that Jesus was a white man. She just slid that in there, you know. Jesus was not white. You can have Santa. Who cares? Garbage anyway. Bogus anyway. But Jesus was not white. Now some would say, why does that matter? If it didn't matter, why'd you change it? It definitely matters. If you want to subjugate, if you want to exploit, if you want to mentally enslave a people, if you want to justify slavery, Jesus had to be white. If you want to justify the mistreatment of black people in America, who are God's chosen people, by the way, who were chosen by God, who God manifested himself unto, Jesus had to be white. But that's not the case. That's not what the scriptures are saying. That's not what history is saying. All right, so this is Acts, the 21st chapter, verse 37. It reads, "And as Paul was to be led into the castle, he said unto the chief captain, May I speak unto thee? Who said, Canst thou speak Greek? Then listen to what this guy says to Paul. Art not thou that Egyptian, which before these days madest an uproar? Art now thou that Egyptian?" He thought Paul was an Egyptian. Now, you have 3 tribes. You have Joseph, mistaken for an Egyptian. You have Moses from the tribe of Levi, mistaken for an Egyptian. And you have Paul from the tribe of Benjamin, mistaken for an Egyptian. And you have Jesus from the tribe of Judah. Jesus from the tribe of Judah, who was black. The Israelites are black people. And I can go through other, we're just really scratching the surface, to be honest. Just scratching the surface. Just scratching the surface. Let's go to John and find out what all people should understand. Because it's not about whether or not Santa Claus was black or white. Okay? That's not the issue. When it comes to worship, it's not the issue. But if you can't just worship God any kind of way. You can't just say, I'm worshiping his birthday when he never told you to do that. And I'm going to have a fat white man in a red suit with some reindeer. And one of them have a shiny red nose. He going to come and slay. He's omnipresent. Right? And he's omniscient. He knows whether or not you've been naughty or nice. You're going to get him the attributes of God. And then worship him and say you worshiping the true and living God. You can't do that. You shouldn't do that. You're going to pay for that. That's just honest. This is not a message of hatred. This is a message for all, whatever your nationality, to come out of this foolishness. Okay? But it's not about whether or not he's black and white, because these stations, everybody's using it for their own benefit, They know that color, Fox knows that color and race relations in the country is a very polarizing issue, one that they could jump upon and then you got the other so-called left which they are corporate, because you got so-called left, they say, oh, that's a travesty and all this thing, and how, you know, he could be black and all this, as if that's really the issue. Then you got comedians making fun of it, because it is foolishness, and it is silly. But when you look at it, the issue is not whether or not Santa Claus is white or black. The issue is whether or not you be celebrating Christmas as a whole. The issue is whether or not you should be worshiping God falsely. This is what you need to know about God, because some will say, well, Christmas is done in the right spirit. I want to put Christ back in Christmas. And they say all these things. Christ was never in Christmas. Christ was never in Christmas. That's a pagan festival. And this is what you need to know about God. Black, white, whatever your color is. This is John, the Gospel according to John, chapter 4, in verse 22. This is what he says to the Samaritan woman at the well. He says, verse 21, he says, Jesus said unto her, Woman, verse 21, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh when ye shall neither in this mountain nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father. He says, ye worship, ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. Okay? What does that mean? First of all, he tells you don't know what you're worshiping. Just like people today, they don't know what they're worshiping. And he says salvation, if you want salvation, it's of the Jews. In other words, you have to do what the Jews or Israel as a nation was given. You have to keep his laws, statutes, and commandments, and have faith in the Messiah. That's what you have to do if you want to be saved. You can't just make up stuff. You can't just carve out pumpkins and put Christmas trees in your house and paint Easter eggs. All this is pagan. And go to church on the day of the sun and do all these things which he never told you to do and think God will be pleased. This is why, verse 24, God is a spirit. He is not man. He is not a man. He is the creator of heaven and earth. He is the one that is omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. God is a spirit. And they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. And the truth is that Christmas is a lie. Okay? The truth is that he was black. He was a black man. He was black. And when he come back, you know what you're going to see? You're going to see a black man. His hair was white like wool and skin the color of brass burned in a furnace. That's what you're going to see. Now the question is, will you be in that number, in that first resurrection with him and come back to take over this world, or will you be one of the ones that tries to hide under the rocks? Say, hide us from the wrath of the Lamb. Something to think about. Something to think about.